Where you guys choose to collect data and report data is an important step for learning more about your water quality resources. In this chapter, we're going to cover things to consider as well as how to report your location to attribute your data to.
There are many factors to consider in choosing a monitoring site. We'll discuss some of the most common reasons that volunteers choose a site, what factors you can consider, and how to identify your site location and map your new site. Then we'll discuss the datasheet headers present on all the datasheets.
So we'll start with choosing a site and how someone decides where to monitor. Choosing where to monitor can be really informative for how you look and learn about the local conditions of a stream. So, a lot of people have streams in their backyard or streams in their local neighborhood that they have access to, and those are great places to monitor because honestly, state agencies, most of our access points come from road crossings. So, data collected in more localized areas could be more informative and help bridge some of our gaps. So, it's great if you have access to a stream from your property or from neighboring properties and using that as a way to select your site. It's also great to again think about where you and your family recreate. If you guys go to a park often, or if you go to a conservation area or a wilderness area and you often are playing in that stream, this data again can be informative to knowing that that stream is safe and also promoting protections of a stream that you value for recreational purposes. Um, and if you think about it, our macro collection has a lot to do with aquatic life and fishing. So again, this can help protect some of those recreational uses within your streams. It's also important to consider, again, these are all kind of goals, so there are things to keep in mind when you're selecting your sites or kind of historical reasons why monitors have selected certain areas. But pollutant concerns can also be a component of that. So if you are worried that the water quality in a local stream has changed, if you are worried that we could be doing more to protect these resources, data is an ammunition. Data and education is supporting maybe concerns and could help show that additional resources could be put within this watershed or that follow-up professional monitoring needs to occur in these areas that we don't already know. You can also reach out to either MDC or MoDNR email addresses and ask if we can maybe help if we have suggestions for where you can monitor. Particularly, it might help to pinpoint some goals or pinpoint kind of location requirements if you can travel or if you can't. But we can also try to see if we have any programs or things we can partner you with for collecting data. We can also, again, you guys collecting data can help bridge some monitoring gaps. So we can show you kind of some of our resources, but a lot of streams don't have data on it or don't have recent data on it. So you can again reach out to a MoDNR staff member and we can pull and see if there's any data collected for a certain area. And we can also help kind of bridge our gaps in monitoring data to help provide more information and education on our resources. So these are all areas in which you can have goals in mind and considerations when selecting your monitoring site. If you're interested in bridging a monitoring gap, you can look up monitoring gaps by accessing the Missouri Stream Team interactive map. If you zoom in using this map, you may find some streams that don't have a data indicator icon. This icon is a black beaker with a bug inside. If your stream is missing an icon, It may have no volunteer data collected on it before, so it may be a good or new information if you can monitor on that site. You can also reach out to a staff member at streamteam@dnr.mo.gov to ask where professional data is missing and if you can help bridge gaps for what data we have professionally. There's 115,000 miles of stream systems, and we do have a lot of streams that are missing data, as well as some streams with data that is quite old. Another thing that can happen is some of these sites with the black beaker icon are currently being monitored. Majority of these sites were monitored historically, but are actually open and needing someone to pick them up to continue on the data that was previously collected. If you're not sure where to monitor, these black icons are good indicators of places where someone has previously been able to safely access a stream. Feel free to reach out to staff and ask if any of these sites are open so you can adopt one of these sites as a new monitoring location. Now we're going to talk about some requirements or factors to consider when selecting a monitoring site. When it comes to monitoring a stream, it is important to consider what type of stream system you have. We categorize streams into 3 different categories: perennial, ephemeral, and intermittent streams. These streams are classified based upon their flow patterns, and the flow patterns are relevant to how the stream channel is embedded within the groundwater table. So this up and down feature is showing that groundwater table, and this line here is outlining each type of stream's stream channel. Perennial streams are streams that have constant flowing water throughout all times of the year. Part of the reason that it will have constantly flowing water is that the stream channel is constantly submerged within the groundwater table. So there's influence from the groundwater into the flow patterns of that stream. The intermittent stream may have a fluctuating relationship with its stream channel within the groundwater table. Intermittent streams will always have water, but that water during dry periods may be pooled. Ephemeral, as the name suggests, may have temporary flowing water. So that stream channel may be above the groundwater table, so it doesn't have a feed-in or influence from groundwater, and most of the water that contributes to ephemeral streams may be due to runoff or rain events. So ephemeral streams are fed by rain or precipitation. Intermittent streams will have pools throughout the year because it is partially embedded. Its stream channel is partially embedded within the groundwater table, and perennial streams will have constant flow throughout the year. When it comes to monitoring, keep in mind the type of stream you are monitoring in. The best kinds of streams are perennial streams that have constant flowing water. Intermittent streams are also good, but keep in mind that those streams must at least maintain pools within dry periods. If you are not sure if your stream is intermittent or ephemeral, it may be helpful to check your stream during a dry period, such as late summer, to make sure that the stream is maintaining at least pools. A monitoring site is really a section of stream. We consider these sections to be roughly 300 feet in length. When you're selecting a monitoring area or site, we do recommend that you also keep a lookout for habitat, or at least one riffle, which we'll talk a little bit more about later. We also recommend that you make sure, especially if you're having multiple site and one upstream and downstream, that you keep your sites separate and you don't overlap. You don't want to be collecting net sets, maybe upstream of a bridge and downstream of a bridge, especially if you're considering those two different data points. They could be representing different water quality upstream and downstream, so that's why it helps to keep your data uniform and located to one area. So again, keep in mind monitoring sites are 300 feet in length, roughly the size of one football field. Here are examples of habitat to consider when looking for your monitoring site. So you may have access to your site by a trail or a road crossing, but if you don't see habitat like this or other habitats that we outline in the macroinvertebrate chapters, you may want to walk a little bit upstream or downstream until you find a good habitat sampling area, especially if your goal is to look at the aquatic life or the macroinvertebrates within your stream system. Here in a picture are outlines of a riffle, which is an area of stream that is shallow and the water runs over the rocks. You can kind of outline a riffle by seeing where it's kind of bubbling or more active water moving over the rocks. This is great habitat to sample your net sets with. So when you're looking for your site, try to have habitat in mind for picking a good spot. So important considerations to think about, again, what are your goals of monitoring? Are you looking to monitor in a stream that doesn't have a lot of data? Are you looking to protect biological life? So you need habitat. Are you looking to protect a pristine water? Are you looking to find if it's contaminated by pollutants? What concerns or what goals of protections do you have in mind will help you kind of select a site, or if you need help and guidance on selecting a site, it will help orient us for how to coach you on a good site selection. Another thing to think about, again, if you're concerned about and you're interested in doing biomonitoring, make sure that you have habitat present. The habitat's going to be covered in the macro chapters, but in summary, there are those riffles, so the tumbling water area, root mats, so kind of fibrous roots that have been submerged underwater for long periods of time, snags, so woody debris that's been in water for a long period of time, and non-flow areas. But riffles are kind of the best areas to sample with our protocols. So keep in mind the habitat presence. Also, again, think about maybe why you're monitoring. So if you're concerned with a potential pollutant in source, so either it be non-point source or point, it might help to have a monitoring spot downstream of those source areas as well as upstream to compare how those sources are changing the water quality within your local stream. Another thing to keep in mind is you don't want anything intersecting your site. So if possible, you're going to want to be either upstream or downstream of tributaries and even road crossings, particularly, if an accident occurs, having a site either downstream or upstream of that road crossing could help have a comparison of how the water quality has changed. Here's an example or image of a monitoring site. Keep in mind that a monitoring site is 300 feet in length and 100 yards. So we wouldn't want our monitoring site to be in the middle of this picture because there would be a tributary coming in to the site in the middle of your site collection. So for this reference, you'd want to be collecting data always downstream of where this tributary is coming in. You can also see at the site there's habitat present, so this would be helpful for when sampling for macroinvertebrates. So these are important things to keep in mind when choosing a site. Site accessibility may also be dependent on permission from local landowners, particularly if you need to cross a property to access a stream site. We have resources and tools that can help you all ask for permission to monitor or walk through someone's property. This publication is posted on the Stream Team website under About Us tab, the link publication, and it's called Hello Streamside Landowner. This document has kind of an outline of what you're doing, and it also has a way that you can provide your personal contact information. Remember, when you're monitoring your site, requesting permission is beneficial because it can make your monitoring more safe, and requesting permission can also promote an avenue for education and outreach on those stream resources as well. We also recommend that you ask permission from public areas such as state parks or conservation areas. Most likely, folks working at these areas will be happy that you're monitoring and interested in the data you're collecting. There may be some studies going on in these local streams that a conservation agent or state park agent may recommend that you steer away from certain areas when it comes to data collection. So letting folks know in public areas is also beneficial, as well as letting folks know what you're doing in a private land access. If you have questions on this, like how to find a property owner, you can also contact a Stream Team staff member and we can try to assist you. So here is a scenario and kind of illustration of what to consider when selecting different monitoring sites based upon your goals. The dashed line is outlining the larger watershed, and the dotted lines are indicating subwatersheds within this larger watershed. The black lines are illustrating rivers or streams. These little black lines are what we call tributaries because they're running into this larger stem of stream. When selecting a site, something to consider, especially if you're looking at how water quality has changed or if your water quality has been impacted, it is important to select a water that is upstream of an area and downstream of a potential impact area. So if you look at sites 2 and 3, you can see that 2 is upstream because it's monitoring in a headwater, and that 3 is downstream of another sub-watershed's tributary coming in. So if you were concerned about non-point source or management practices potentially going on in the sub-watershed and how it's influencing this main stem of water, monitoring upstream of where that tributary comes in and downstream of your tributary coming in would be beneficial to compare the data and see if there's an impact. If your water quality is worse at Site 3, you may be able to say, hey, maybe something's going on in this watershed, or it could be an outreach moment of could different management practices be applied within this watershed to help improve the water quality. If you also look at sites 4 and 5, let's say this square right here is a point source. So it's piping potential pollutants into this main stem of the water. Again, to see if that's impacting water quality and to help compare It's helpful to have a site upstream of the point source and then downstream of that point source, and you could compare the data to see if it's different. Also, something to consider is if you have a site like this site number 1, when mapping out and looking at your watershed, this site number 1 again may give you a holistic picture of all the different point and non-point sources contributing to the water quality of this main stem of the river. So different sites can help tell a story or help provide a comparison of some of the data you collect.
Now let's talk about how you can create and or adopt new sites within our program. This is a very important step because without accurate location information about where you're going to be monitoring, your data will be meaningless and you and others won't be able to use it. So this isn't difficult, but it does require you to pay attention to details. So feel free to reach out to us if you have any questions. There are two ways that you can submit sites to us. The first is by using our database. This is by far the easier and more efficient way to gain a new site. The database allows you to select a stream location on a map where you wish to begin monitoring, and or you can adopt a site that has already been created by other stream team volunteers. The second way you can let us know where you want to monitor is by submitting an image or a physical copy of a map with your monitoring location marked and with a site description. We'll go over both of these in detail in the next few slides. I'm going to be showing you a brief tutorial of how to create or adopt a site in the new Stream Team database. After you log in to the Stream Team database, you'll see this home screen here, and then you'll see some menu options over to the left. Under the Stream Team VWQM options, the first one is Site Creation and Adoption. So we'll click on that. You'll see at the top some site information instructions, a map, and then some fields that will auto-populate based on what we do in the map section. Some things to note here is that there is a reset button and a help button at the top right-hand corner of the map. The help button is going to give you some more detailed instructions about creating and adopting a site, and the reset button will help you when you potentially go from adopting a site to maybe choosing a different site to adopt or adopting a site to creating a site. If you go between adopting and creating or adopting a site and then adopting a different site, we recommend just resetting the map so that everything can pull in and auto-populate correctly below the map depending on where you are selecting a site. Some other things to note about the map is that there's a search function here. You can toggle between searching a VWQM site specifically or just general Missouri addresses or Missouri locations. Otherwise, it will default to searching either. So let's say I want to create a site in Jefferson City. I'm going to search for Jefferson City. Here on the map, you'll also see a legend. The legend denotes active and inactive sites. Active sites are mostly black, and inactive sites are black and have a white outline around them. Inactive sites have not been monitored or created in 3 years. So we encourage folks to adopt inactive sites rather than active sites. To do that, I'm going to zoom in until I see a draw point tool up at the left-hand corner of the map, right here. This denotes that now I can select a site. Once I select a site, a pop-up of some information about the site is going to show so you can briefly sort of see, is this the site that I want to adopt? And then whenever I click on the site as well, all the information about the site is going to pop up below the map. Like this. So the county, the state, the stream name, site description, and all of the location information should auto-populate. If any of this looks incorrect, especially the site description or anything else about the site, you can email streamteam@dnr.mo.gov and we will correct any mistakes. So at this point, I could hit the submit button and it will add that site to my list of sites that I can then submit data on. So instead of doing that, I'm going to reset the map and now show you how to create a site. Creating a site is essentially the same process with just a couple more steps as adopting a site. So this time, going to search Jefferson City again. And I will zoom in again until I see this draw point tool. It's important that you zoom into the draw point tool because that basically unlocks the feature of being able to place a point on the map of where you want to create a site. Generally, I would tell folks to just place the point in the middle of where your site location is going to be. So if your site is 300 feet long, you would just want to place it in the middle so that it's about 150 feet upstream and 150 feet downstream. So let's say I wanted to create a site. Let's see, is this upstream or downstream? Okay, so this looks like it's upstream. So let's say I wanted to create a site upstream from Friendship Road. So I'm going to zoom in until I see the draw point tool. I'll click on it. And then now you see this blue box. This is the tool that I'm going to use to create my site. So let's say I wanted to put it right here. And now information about where I dropped that site is going to populate below the map. But you'll see here that the site description still needs to be filled out because it's required for each site. So I'm going to create a brief site description for where I placed my site. By doing that, I'm going to use Friendship Road as a permanent landmark for where my site is located. And I'm going to measure how far upstream I am from Friendship Road. I can do that by using the measuring tool down here on the bottom left-hand corner. I click on it, and then I'm going to start from the road, and then I'm going to click on the dark blue line measurements. And notice I'm measuring the stream miles. I'm not necessarily measuring just a straight line from Friendship Road to my site. I'm following the contours of the stream. And then once I'm done, I can double click at the end, and that should allow me to stop measuring. And then I can change this distance from feet to meters or miles or yards. And then I can also, I'm going to change mine to meters, and then I'm just going to round my number here. So if it's 197, I'm just going to round it to about 200 meters. So I have my measurement. So I'm going to say 200 meters upstream from the Friendship Road bridge crossing. So now I have my new site on her branded branch. It was denoted as a tributary, and I've got my site description. So now I'm going to hit submit, and now that should add it to my list of sites that I can now submit data on. I'll show you that here by if I just click on a visual survey data sheet or any of the data sheets, they'll have an option to add a new data sheet. And then when I go to select a site here to submit data on it, I should see it now listed as my 7th site. on her branded branch. You can see my site description here, so I can tell, and then here I can fill in the rest of the information about my data sheet. And that is how you can create, adopt a site, and then select that site to submit data on it. Now that we've gone over how to adopt or create a site in the database, I want to take a second to describe a little bit more about what the site location description is and how to create one, either if you're submitting a physical map to us or if we're using the Stream Team database. So you always want to use the same verbal description for a particular site and not use GPS coordinates. So if you say that your site is 300 feet downstream of Highway AA, then you're going to want to put that on every single data sheet so that you know what site location you're submitting data to. A lot of this information will be pre-populated if you're entering your data online, so there's less room to make mistakes, but it's always good to use the same verbal description whenever you're writing out on your data sheet and for whenever you're submitting data online. When you create a new site, you're going to want to describe your site's location using distances up or downstream of road crossings or particularly permanent crossings or permanent landmarks. So this can be road crossings, it can be directions from major intersections, it can be even upstream or downstream of tributaries. But the point is that it's the distance and the direction from permanent landmarks. So the example that I would give to folks is that a stream could be 300 feet downstream from a highway bridge crossing. If you wish to submit a site to us not using the Stream Team database and instead sending us a physical map or an email with an image, we can create this site for you in the system, not a problem. But we want to make sure that the site description is accurate and that the map is zoomed in far enough so that we can clearly see where you're planning to monitor and clearly see enough roads or bridge crossings that will help us know that you have accurately described where your site is. So if for some reason some information isn't congruent, so if your site description doesn't match where you have placed a marker on the map with where you're monitoring, then we'll just have to reach out to you and get that information so that we can clearly create a site for you in the system. Once we do that, this data will be updated and it will also be reflected on our interactive map. We only need a map from you the first time that you create the site. So after that, you can submit data to this site and we don't need a map moving forward. After you have fully completed your level 1 training, both the online portion and the field certification, if you want to send us a physical copy or email a copy of your new site using the email on the screen, these are the things that you're going to want to include with that physical or emailed map. You'll want your name, the county where your site is located, the site number, if this is your first site or if you're submitting multiple sites at the same time, you can denote which map you would like to be your site number 1 or 2 and so forth. The stream name, your site description, and or the site ID from the interactive map if you're adopting an existing site. If you're planning to submit a site to us not using the online database, then you might want some ideas about where to find maps. So the first one that I would recommend is using our Stream Team interactive map that can be found via our Stream Team website. The interactive map shows sites that are active and sites that are inactive. So you can see sites that haven't been monitored for at least 3 years, which are the inactive sites, and you can click on a site and get that information and send that to us, and we can help you adopt that site. You can also see where there haven't been any sites created yet. So you can see where we have some data gaps in the state, and you can choose to monitor somewhere that no one else has monitored yet. So you can send us a screenshot of the location of a site that's already existing, or drop a pin on the interactive map of where you would like us to create a site for you. You can also use Google Maps if that's more familiar to you. The only downside is that there might be a site that's already created where you can't necessarily see it on Google Maps, and so we might just reach out to you asking if you would like to adopt an existing site. The other good thing about the Stream Team Interactive Map is that it will show you things like different point sources, so whether that's treatment facilities or storm drain pipes coming into streams. And there's some other layers that you can turn off or on the Stream Team Interactive Map that will kind of just give you a little bit more context to a site that you wish to adopt or where you're wanting to create a site. So I would highly recommend checking out the Stream Team Interactive Map. And then also, if not, Google Maps is a great option as well.
Site numbers are entered into our system chronologically per volunteer. So when a volunteer submits a site to us, we'll enter that data in and it will be their site number 1. When a volunteer submits data for that site number 1, that becomes permanent and we can no longer remove that site. So if you go out to your first site and you collect data and you decide, hey, the site was actually really tricky to get to, I want to look for an easier site, you can add and submit a map to us and a physical description, and we'll add on a new site, but your new site will be numbered site number 2, so on and so forth. So if you're submitting multiple sites at once, we will try to number your sites based on what you're suggesting to us, but we can't go back and delete or change sites once they're in our system. So your first site is always your site number 1. All right, we're going to talk about the datasheet headers. So all scientists, when they go out and monitor, they commonly fill out information on their sample bottles. And one of the things that they commonly fill out is a description of where they monitored. So we're going to go over a few more features than just, hey, where did you monitor? But this is why it's kind of relevant to the site selection page, is it's important to have an identifier of where and when you monitored and the conditions associated to the data you collected. Here is an example of the header information that is present on all of our data sheets. You can see that it outlines where you monitored, when you monitored, what the conditions were like, as well as who is a responsible data submitter. So who has taken the training and who can a staff member follow up with in regards to the data that was collected on this data sheet. We allow for 2 ways in which folks can submit their data. Online is the easiest, and some of this site identifier location will auto-populate for you. When you are entering your data online, be sure to check that your site location is consistent throughout your data entry process. It is easy to submit for the wrong site if you have multiple, which is totally okay if that happens. You'll need to contact a staff member, and that staff member will have to delete that data entry, and then you could submit the data for the proper site. Also, be sure to check if your site location has migrated over time. If it's greater than 300 feet away from what you originally proposed, this may be a good indicator to start a new monitoring site location. So we'd need a new map and we could start a new pathway of data collection. For online data entry, date and time is required. So be sure that you record this when you are out in the field. Date, again, we're pretty literal on date, so that is month, day, and year. And time is in military time. Rainfall is also something that can be helpful to collect when it comes to data interpretation. We'll talk more about that. And water temperature, be sure to collect that in degrees Celsius. You'll also want the person submitting the data or who's responsible for the data to have the map or the site listed under their name so that they can properly do data entry. If you are not an online person and you like to physically submit things, that is okay. You can mail us your data. If that is a process in which you would like to submit your data, please be sure that your location information is consistent to what you have submitted on the map, and also be sure to have completed the date, so month, day, and year, time. If you're missing information or if some information is inconsistent, we will follow up with you, and there may be some delays in us entering that data for you. If you have questions, please feel free to reach out to any Stream Team staff and we can help you. One of the categories on the header information, which is optional to submit, is the rainfall before your monitoring event. This can be helpful when it comes to interpretation of your data, particularly if you've had a heavy rainfall, which may impact non-point source runoff, or your biological life and excessive flow conditions within your stream. The go-to that we recommend for looking up rainfall, particularly for 7 days before your monitoring event, is utilizing weatherunderground.com. Using Weather Underground, you can select the Maps and Radar feature and look at their Wonder Map component. On the Wonder Map, they have multiple stations that have precipitation data if you select that precipitation filter. When looking for data, you want to make sure that that rain data is as close to your site as possible. We also recommend that the same zip code is an okay go-to for if that gauge is close enough to your site. Once you see your options for the closest station, you can go ahead and select the icon, click Station ID, and that station will give you a historical options for looking up the rainfall. You can select weekly mode and it automatically calculates how much rain would have occurred the week before your monitoring event if you enter in the correct date of your monitoring event. There are other resources such as weather.com or NOAA. These you may be able to look up the daily rainfall and then add them all together in order to calculate the rainfall that occurred a week before your monitoring event. Again, use the resources that make sense for you and your practices. You can also use a rain gauge, particularly if you live near your monitoring site or within that same watershed. Just be sure to dump that rain gauge out 7 days before you go out to monitor so that you can get an accurate reading. If you have questions on how to look up rainfall, we have a walkthrough kind of email or guidance to make it more clear. So feel free to reach out to staff if you have questions on how to do this.
When it comes to submitting your data, a lot of things can go wrong. It's okay to make mistakes, but here are some examples of common errors that we've found when folks are submitting data. For starters, the site number field. For this monitor, it's unlikely that they have over 4,000 sites, so this is probably their stream team number instead. For the county field, North County is a local name and only means something if you're from St. Louis. Be sure to use the actual county name where the site location is at. For the stream name, Litter Getters is probably this volunteer's stream team name, not the stream name. For the site description, GPS coordinates cannot be used as a location description. This misplace and an oak tree cannot be located by using a map either. For the trained data submitter, this information was likely filled out by a student, as the trained data submitter, Miss Brown, needs to be the one filling out the data sheet, and her first and last name should be used. For the stream team number, if you forget your number, it's listed on your stream team ID card, or you can contact stream team staff. For the date, does this mean April 11th or April of 2011? Be sure to specify the month, day, and year that you sampled. For the time, this is not in military time format. 6:30 in the morning should be represented by 0630, or if it was 6:30 p.m., it should be represented by 1830. For the participants, you can leave this section blank if you were the only person who went out monitoring, or if you had additional people out with you, feel free to put how many folks you were out collecting data with, in addition to yourself. For rainfall, this needs to be a number and not filled out as none or trace. For water temperature, 73 degrees Celsius is 163 degrees Fahrenheit. That is incredibly hot for a stream. So unless this is being measured at a cooling water discharge, the measurement is incorrectly reported in Fahrenheit. So be sure to use degrees Celsius.
In summary, if you guys were to not identify on any of your data sheets where you went out to monitor, we cannot enter in that data if you're submitting a physical copy to us. So please be explicit when you're doing your data entry or when you're filling out your data sheets to mail them into us. Also, when you're submitting a map to us, please be sure that what you have is all matching. So for example, if you're identifying your site location with a marker, just try to have your site location description accurately depict that marker feature. It is important that we know the location and can associate your data to a specific area of sampling. When you are looking at a map of your site, you may find that the stream you're monitoring on does not have an official name that is showing up on the map. If that is the case, likely your stream is intermittent, and the way in which we will name it is tributary to that next larger body of water that your stream runs into. There may be multiple streams that your stream will run into before you can find the actual name of your stream. When it comes to naming a stream, we have had a few stream members that have applied to have their streams officially named within the Geographic Names Information System. This is a great way to provide additional community and awareness for a local body of water. If you are interested in naming a stream, or if you're not sure what the name of your stream is, please feel free to reach out to staff. All right, we're going to go through a little summary with some questions of some of the features we've covered in this chapter. Number 1, how long is your monitoring site? Think about those football fields. It's 100 yards or 300 feet in length. What is important to consider when selecting a site? Again, there's many different factors based upon your personal goals, but things to think about are, is it safe? So can you get down the stream banks with equipment? Do you have access or permission? What are your goals? Are you interested in learning about macroinvertebrates? You might need some habitat available to do that sampling. Uh, you know, what's going on? Are you concerned about stormwater impacting your water quality? Well, maybe you want to monitor near some stormwater systems. So there's a lot of things to think about when it comes to how or where you select a site. Keep in mind what your goals may be. Are you concerned about the water chemistry? are you concerned about the life of your stream? So the macros. Are GPS coordinates good, okay for a good verbal site location description? So when it comes to describing your site, we require a physical site description that's verbal. We cannot just accept GPS coordinates at this time, so please be sure to describe your site so that it's easy for someone else to pick it up at some point down the road. What 3 things must match for accurate site mapping? That will be where you've identified your site to that verbal site description. And then if you have multiple numbers, just making sure those numbers make sense. So site and site description are the most important parts, and that number. Here's our contact information. If you have any questions on where to monitor or how to select a site, please feel free to reach out to staff.